Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing fine. We're going to have a good day today. Going to go over some things, especially with Ayn Rand. And before I get there, I just want to mention that I was on JFG's program the other day. What was it, Sunday? His Sunday, my early Monday. I'm in Frankfurt, he's in Canada. And there's good old JFG. And we had a little talk about space time. You know, so if you're interested in general relativity and space-time and Einstein's equations and so on, you might want to visit either JFG's or my site. I uploaded it as well, and you can take a look at what we said. Okay. And what do I have to say about space-time? Well, we start with general relativity, right? And general relativity started in 1915, had a little equation in there. This is what it looks like. Ugly thing there. And, with this, Einstein became famous about 4 years later when Arthur Eddington confirmed that Einstein's interpretation, not only his mathematics, but his physical interpretation were correct for how the universe works, okay, how gravity works specifically. What objections do I have? Well, the big G there, that's the gravitational constant G. And the problem I've got with that, it's determined here on Earth in, you could say, a micro scenario compared to the entire universe, okay, to the gravity of the entire universe. And so, but general relativity deals with the cosmic scenarios. It doesn't deal with our local scenarios here on Earth. And so we have we have a value, a constant, the G, gravitational constant G, and it's determined here on Earth, and we generalize and use it throughout the universe. In fact, the G that Einstein puts in his equation is not used here on Earth. A lot of people are not aware that Einstein's equations only work out there. They don't work here on Earth. You cannot explain why a spoon falls to the floor with Einstein's equation. People don't understand that. People are still thinking, oh, Einstein proved, Einstein showed, and he knew. No, Einstein made it clear, and today any mathematical physicist will tell you that Einstein's equation only works out there in the cosmic scenario. Down here, you got to try to use quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics does not have a theory, does not have an equation, does not have it hasn't proved the graviton, the existence of the graviton. And even if they did, they wouldn't be able to explain gravity here on Earth because you can't pull with particles. Just that simple. And that's what they're trying to do. They do it mathematically. They send negative momentum, right? And that's how they produce attraction. Is that the only problem? No, the other problem is the letter C in the equation, as far as I'm concerned, okay? This is my interpretation of what the problems are with Einstein's equation. The next one is the photon. The photon, that's Arthur Eddington, by the way, how he proved it in 1919, that light curves around the sun because of mass. And the issue there is that if a photon curves along space-time, because space-time is curved, if that's the physical interpretation, well, we got a problem because that means the photon does not travel at 300,000 kilometers per second out there in space. In fact, it can never travel at a constant speed. It can never travel straight, right? What it does is curved around space-time, first of all, but then it curves around every single atom in the universe. Every atom in the universe has mass, and as far as the tiny photon is concerned, it's going to fall into that depression created by that tiny atom. So all the atoms in the universe create a dent in space-time, a little pothole, if you will. And the photon, will be swerving through every one of those potholes and holes and depressions and whatever. So the photon has no chance of traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second at a constant speed under general relativity, under general relativity's proposal and physical interpretation. So I've got a problem with that to begin with. I didn't cover that subject on JFG's program. I just add that on there so that you're aware of it. What did I cover? Well, I covered the fact that space-time is a concept. You've got space, which is nothing, synonym of nothing, of vacuum. Other people give it structure and they say, no, space is three-dimensional. Okay, I'll concede. Let's concede that for the sake of argument. Certainly, time is not a physical object. I don't know a certain single person on Earth that says that time is a physical object. And so you take space. We've conceded it's a physical object. Okay, so whatever space is, it's got some three dimensions, right? So it's like a rock. We can say it's like a rock, or like anything that's got three dimensions, a blob that's got three dimensions. And you mix it with time, and you're going to get space-time. And now you're going to bend it. You're going to bring that into the world of physics, of the world of existence, and bend among them time. Because you're bending space. Fine, forget about space. How about time? You're bending time? What does that mean? And you might say, well, you didn't understand general relativity very well, Bill, because, see, that's a mathematical calculation and blah, 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 blah. But see, the problem, the problem comes when they use time as a physical entity and they say they warp time, and that creates a depression, a physical depression, and objects fall in there. So now we got a real problem because time is treated as a physical object when the physical interpretation comes in. And people say, well, that's just an analogy. No, we have to explain how the Earth goes around the sun. And if the Earth goes around the sun because there's a depression caused in a physical medium called space-time, then it's not an analogy, at least not an abstract analogy. No, it's an analogy of the real thing. You got to explain why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system. And these people are saying that there's a depression, there's a wall of space-time, and the Earth cannot go through that wall of space-time and leave the solar system. So the issue is that the physical interpretation that Einstein gave is what we're attacking, okay? And so here's a few images to back all that up, okay? Here you have space and time, okay? Space they always put on the horizontal axis, and they put all three dimensions of space there. So you're supposed to think of space as a three-dimensional entity. Fine. And then you have time flowing upwards, okay? So you got space-time. And what do we have here? Well, we have a fishnet. And the first problem is the background. What is that black stuff that gives contour to the fishnet? I mean, if the fishnet is space and time, what is the black stuff? I mean, is it the fifth dimension? Is it God? What is that black stuff that gives contour to it? That's the first question we've got. But then they do something even more horrifying, and that's that they put another concept on top of it. They put mass on top of the fishnet, and they say it's mass that bends space-time. So we have a mathematical concept, kilograms, right? Pounds, ounces, and it pushes the the fishnet downward, so it warps it. Okay, so it warps the fishnet, and the first problem there is that you're using force to produce that effect. Why doesn't the mass push the fishnet upwards, for example? Right, that's one question. But then we have what they do. They put the moon on there, and they say, look, the mass. Think of the mass as the Earth. The Earth weighs down the fishnet, so the Earth has mass. And now we have the moon rolling around it. Okay, So now the moon does not fly away from the earth, from the mass of the earth. Why? Because the earth created a fishnet that physically constrains the moon from flying away. That's the physical interpretation that Einstein gave his equations. And so the question, does any of that make sense to you? And of course, when you finish doing all that, the mathematician comes in there and laughs at you, and he says, "Look, here we have a cartoon that exemplifies what all you nitwits don't understand." It says, "Understanding gravity, space-time is like a rubber sheet." Okay, it's a rubber sheet, right? Like a trampoline, like a canvas, like a fishnet. Massive objects distort the sheet, and they distort it because they're pulled down by what, says the student. And the teacher says, space-time is like this set of equations, for which any analogy must be an approximation. What do you mean an approximation? I mean, this has nothing to do with accuracy or precision. It's got to do with the physical interpretation that these people are giving you. They're saying, look, you got a bowling ball that pushes down your couch, and then the tennis ball rolls around it. And so the tennis ball doesn't fly out because it's got this angular momentum, this rolling, this centrifugal force, right? And what keeps it tied to the sun is the fact that the sun is weighing down space-time. So it's the roulette mechanism. You know, the little ball goes around the roulette. Why doesn't it fly out? Because there's a wall preventing the little ball from flying out. And what keeps it rolling is the fact that, it's got this angular momentum, okay? And that's exactly the mechanism that Einstein described for, or that's his explanation for gravity, according to his equations. And so, it's up to you to think whether that's a rational explanation, physical interpretation, if they're just going to use their concepts, these mathematical concepts, as objects, as walls that prevent the Earth or the Moon from flying out of the solar system. That's the issue. And then I pointed out that you have Halley's Comet goes back and forth through this wall. In fact, the Moon goes through the wall that the Earth has as well, goes in and out, see, because you have this big wall created by the sun and this tiny wall created, round wall, right, created by the Earth. And the Moon goes right through the big wall of the sun back and forth around the Earth. So it's like, you're saying the tennis ball goes through the brick wall and comes back out through the brick wall going around the Earth. So if you can understand that, if that's rational to you, well, okay. I can't help you any further, okay? And again, this issue about mass being a physical object that pushes down on the canvas, that's exactly what all the mathematicians today use to explain black holes. You have a black hole, and a black hole, what is a black hole? Well, it's a zero-dimensional, it's got no dimensions whatsoever. It's got no volume, no size, okay? It's not big, because it ain't at all. And it's got this no size, no volume thingy, and somehow it compels a star to go around itself. And that's how they detected the first so-called black hole that was confirmed, verified, discovered. And it was discovered by a fellow named Tom Bolton, American who worked in Canada. And what he saw was this. They observed, this is a drawing, by the way, that they made. This is not the real thing. But they saw something like this. They saw a star rolling around nothing, okay? And they said, what could be causing it? And they said, well, of course, we know. We know because we've already did the calculation in advance before we even looked at the sky. And that was that they figured out, Chandrasekhar was the first one to do that, if you take a star, which is bigger than the sun, and you crunch it down to pulp, to nothing, you make it disappear structurally, but the mass remains behind, well, then you have enormous mass and zero volume. Okay, that's what you have. And that's what this is. You have a star rolling around essentially a zero volume that has infinite amount of mass. So what they did, they went in there and they put by hand the black hole. Okay, so they put it in there. Now you can see why the star rolls around the black hole, because there's a mass there that's creating this, and we never see that black hole because it's invisible, right? Just enormous mass, zero volume, dark. That's why it's called black hole, right? And what happens? If we zoom in, this is what you would see. I mean, if you could go in there, right, very close to this so-called black hole. And the only issue we need to answer is, what is the mechanism? What is the mechanism that compels the star to remain faithful to the black hole? Are they tied together by some kind of rope? Are they, is there a cable between them? Because you can't say that it's just mass. Mass is a concept. That's good as you can use that as a mathematical description. You cannot say that mass is what holds that star to the black hole, and that's why they roll around. And this is the problem. The problem, they're using concepts to give physical interpretations. That's where the irrationality of quantum mechanics and general relativity in this case, right? That's where they are irrational. Okay, and so it's up to people to figure it out for themselves if any of that makes sense to them, if those physical interpretations, if those mechanisms make any sense to them. Anyways, today's the Ayn Rand's day. I think it's the 5th one in the series. And I started with definitions the other day, some of her definitions. And what I'm trying to show throughout this series is that Ayn Rand was not objectivist. Her philosophy was so-called objectivism. I'm saying it should have been called subjectivism, because everything she did, absolutely everything, every 2 sentences was subjective. It introduced an observer, it introduced consciousness, it introduced perception, and so especially sensing, the senses, okay? That you must perceive, you must detect, you must touch or see. And everything is like that in her entire work. There's nothing that is not like that. And that's what I want to show. And I want to show it objectively, not subjectively. Some people say, well, you didn't understand Ayn Rand. You didn't grasp exactly what she was saying. And there's a problem there, because some people interpret A and some other people interpret Z, okay? And some people say that, for example, just as an example, that Ayn Rand believed that concepts exist, or somehow incorporate concepts into her notion of existence. And others say, no, she specifically said no. And so we have all these followers of Ayn Rand, they have totally different versions. And that's because they interpret Ayn Rand according to their predispositions, their biases. And that's why I'm going to do it objectively. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go in to try to interpret or try to second guess her, Ayn, right? In what she meant and what she really was talking about. No, it's going to be straightforward. I'm just going to take her statements as they are. And by looking at the whole series of definitions, you will get the idea that she had no idea about how to define terms scientifically, rationally, in a way that we can use them consistently, like in a dissertation or in a debate, scientific debate, in a rational debate. Hers was just like any other philosopher, so-called philosopher in history. They never learned how to define words. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just go into the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, go into the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, go into the Catholic Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the New Advent, and you will find definitions there. It's just a listing of glossaries, right, of words. And what you'll find in their glossaries is that they have no definition for any word that they ever used in philosophy. Not one. Not one, okay? I haven't looked at all of them, by the way, but I'm willing to put my hand in the fire. The tons that I've looked at, no definition whatsoever. What they have is histories of what all the philosophers, so-called philosophers, thought throughout history about that word. That's what they have, and different theories and so on. They don't have a definition. They say, look, this is what this definition means, or what this word means after 10,000 years of research and philosophizing and whatever, okay, of thinking, proposals and whatever. So they don't have a definition that you can sink your teeth into, your claws into. You can't use any of the definitions they have because they don't have a definition. They always end all their articles like saying, well, we're still researching, and this is what this guy thought, this is what that other guy thought. So we don't have a definition. And to start out with, in the case of Ayn Rand, we don't even have a definition of the word philosophy. Again, a rational definition, one we can use consistently. We've never had one. Since Aristotle, no one has ever defined, or even before him, Plato and Socrates probably, none of them defined the word philosophy. They said love of wisdom. What the hell is that? And they put anything they could think of in there. Philosophy was like, again, as they see it today, the mother of all disciplines. You can't start to think unless you have philosophy, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? Does it mean, it's like saying you're thinking. You got to think before you do physics. You got to think before you do medicine. You got to think before you do law. Well, yeah, I mean, what does that mean? It's just a way of thinking. So no, we have to define the word philosophy in a way that we can attack people who have irrational theories and irrational proposals. And by irrational, I mean religion. I mean opinion, belief. Okay, so it's very clear in my case. I'm saying anyone who has an opinion has a religion. And I don't know any person on earth who doesn't have an opinion or a belief. Me, starting with me, okay? So everybody's got a religion. Religion is not about God. Religion is about belief and opinion. So if you're into politics, you're a religious individual. If you're into religion, traditional religions, Hinduism, Christianity, you have a religion. If you're into mathematical physics, you're also into religion because mathematical physics only has opinions. They have irrational opinions in their case because they turn all concepts into objects. That's totally unacceptable, at least from the point of view of physics, okay? Okay, so here's Ayn's, some call her Ayn. His definition of philosophy, okay? Philosophy is the science. I'm glad she puts the word science in there. These are her words, okay? I'm not putting anything in her mouth. Is the science. And, what is strange about that is people contrast science with philosophy and say, well, philosophy is not science. It's like an opposing or alter ego or whatever of science. And she says philosophy is the science, whatever science is, right? That studies, okay, so we study. And again, I have a problem with study because anybody can study and not know anything, not understand anything, so studying is a bad word to use. I've said that in the past. The fundamental aspects of the nature of existence. I thought physics did that. I thought physics was the science of existence. And she said the fundamental nature of existence. So she's in the wrong field to begin with, okay? I'm going to compare against my definition, okay, right there and then, okay, just so we have something to compare it against. I'm wearing a funny hat because I celebrated 500 years of Mr. Martin Luther, and he put his 95 Theses on a church, and I put them on university, symbolically, okay. Philosophy is the science that explains, not that studies, but explains behavior. Okay, why? Because I define science as rational explanations. So anything that purports to explain falls under science, and science includes anything that purports to explain the universe. Physics explains the phenomena that happen out there, the mechanisms, right? Causes. And philosophy has to explain something else. What does philosophy explain? Behavior. Human behavior primarily. You can include animals if you want. Okay? Why someone did something. You know, why did someone go to war? What led him to that decision? To what is his goal? He wanted to become famous. He wanted to make money. That's philosophy. But to say that philosophy is a way of thinking, we can't use that in science. We can't use it in a rational discussion. That's where the problem is right now. The problem is people have this old-fashioned, this traditional notion of what philosophy is, and that's what they teach in the universities under the heading, philosophy 101, etc. And that's not philosophy. That's nonsense. It's known as nonsense because all that is opinion of how you should behave, recommendations. What is the best political system? That's an opinion. Is it ethical to kill an animal? Is it ethical to marry someone of your own sex? All that's opinion. All that is opinion. And so opinion leads to endless discussion. And maybe that's why philosophy is a good place to go to work, because it's got job security. You never get to see the end of it because it's all opinion. And that's why we can't use that. And philosophy, instead, if we have to explain something, a behavior, then we have theories. And that's what science is about. And then it is a science, as Ayn Rand said. If you say, well, why did Napoleon go to Waterloo in 1815? Well, one guy says, well, he wanted to be famous. The other guy said, well, he wanted to be a movie star. And the other guy says, no, he wanted to rob and steal and kill people, whatever. So they have all these different theories out there, okay? And you listen to all these theories and you reach your own conclusions. But to say that philosophy is just behavior, recommendation, like a diet, like this is what I recommend you have for a diet, okay? Because I think it's good for you, I think it's healthy for you. All that's opinion, and that's why that's not philosophy. Philosophy is not just a way of thinking, a recommendation, a proposal in the sense of what you should do. No, philosophy is why you did something. Okay, so now we start out on the wrong foot with Ayn Rand first because we don't agree on what philosophy is. I just want you to know the contrast here. Okay. What's the problem with Ayn Rand's version? As far as I'm concerned, it's here it synthesizes it. It says I've got science on the left-hand side there. It's objective and it's rational explanations, and it's divided into two branches. One is physics and the other one's philosophy. One studies phenomena, one explains phenomena, the other one explains behaviors, okay? One deals with causes and mechanisms, the other one with reasons and purpose, and the bread and butter of physics is objects, are the objects, okay? And philosophy are the concepts. Now, some people might say, well, what do you mean really by concepts are the bread and butter or the building blocks of philosophy? Well, we have to explain, behavior, and behavior goes into the mind, okay, into how a person thinks, and so that's full of concepts of relations that persons establish. So in that sense, the concept is the bread and butter of philosophy. It's not that we use the word distance for something in philosophy. It's that most of the issues that we're going to resolve by talking about reasons and purpose deal with concepts. As soon as you introduce an object and start talking about an object, you've crossed the line into physics. Now you're not explaining behavior. Now you're explaining something physical. Okay, you're going to say, for example, why did someone cross the street? And you can't go in there and say, well, he's got two legs and the legs move one in front of the other, and that's how he crossed the street. No, now you're talking about physics. You're not talking about the purpose, the reason the person crossed the street. So in that sense, concepts enter the discussion of philosophy, okay? And Ayn here, she was subjective, completely subjective. In fact, we can put her safely here, okay, right? Let's see. Oh, sorry, wrong one. This one is the one I wanted to put up there. Okay, Ayn is under that grouping there, that's heading called epistemology, which has to do with knowledge. Okay, and in science we don't know anything, even though the word science derives from the word knowledge. Of course, that came from the Greeks and primarily from the Latins, from the Romans. the science has nothing to do with knowledge because we don't know anything. And before you can do that, you have to define the word knowledge, which we are going to do that today. Okay? And so, Ayn Rand was here and she was doing epistemology. She dealt with truth, fact, knowledge, proof, evidence, consciousness, sensations, perceptions. She used all five senses. Well, she used all five senses, but primarily she dealt with the two that everybody deals with, which is touch and see. Okay, but yeah, she believed that both entities and existence had to do with touching and with seeing, with perceiving, and that's where we disagree. That's not objective. That's very subjective. And then, yeah, we have the supernatural and irrational theories, which are completely on the right there on the bottom. Supernatural theories, those are the traditional religions primarily. Why are they supernatural? Because you can imagine the objects that do the mediation. You can imagine the mediators, but the explanations are totally irrational. Supernatural is known. You can invoke a god, you can invoke a spirit, you can turn the mind into some kind of angel or whatever. You talk about good and bad, and those are not, you cannot explain a real life phenomenon with that. On the other hand, the irrational theories are a little different than the supernatural theories in that they turn concepts into objects. And again, mathematical physics is famous for that. It goes in there and turns, what is it? For example, it turns mass into a physical object as it bends space-time, turns time into a physical object. It's this coordinate that bends because mass sits on it. What is all that? And yeah, so no, we can't use any of those notions in a consistent way. That's why they belong to religion, because it all comes down to opinion as far as what epistemology is, knowledge. What you know for sure that God exists. Well, your neighbor says that God doesn't exist. So which of you knows for a fact? So knows is just a way of shoving one's religion down someone else's throat. That's what the word knows or knowledge stands for. The word knowledge belongs strictly to religion. Okay, and I'm going to show that in a second here. Okay, let's go with that definition. I started with definitions the other day, showed that a lot of them were subjective, Ayn's definitions. And today I'm going to cover, again, some more. Here's one of them, and that's the word knowledge that she uses every 2 seconds. And she says in, I think it's in Atlas Shrugged, one of her famous books, "You who dread knowledge." I guess she was referring to me. Yeah, I dread knowledge because there's no such thing as knowledge. Anyone using the word knowledge is doing religion, trying to shove his beliefs down your throat. And why? Because we don't have a definition of knowledge to begin with. We're still using Plato's definition there, justified true belief. Knowledge is belief. It's your opinion. That's what knowledge is. There is no such thing as knowledge. And some people confuse and think that it's technology which proves knowledge. See, if we can build a device that's useful, like a cell phone, well, obviously we have knowledge, right? And again, that's confusing the issues. We develop technology by trial and error, not because quantum mechanics is right, is correct, is been proven. Okay, quantum mechanics says nonsense, like a particle can be at 2 places at once. That's one of the worst things that quantum says. So I like to put that one in there. A particle can be at 2 places at once. In fact, it can be at many places at once, according to quantum mechanics. That's an irrational physical interpretation. No matter how you turn it around, it's an irrational physical interpretation. So when they say a quantum computer, why? Because it runs on this notion of decoherence. What does that mean? It means that a particle can be at 2 places at once or at several places at once. And they say that's the explanation we give it. And with the effect that we see in the lab, we can produce a device that works and that gives us all this technology. That doesn't prove the theory that a particle can be at 2 places at once. And that's what people don't understand, that quantum is garbage as far as physical interpretations is concerned. Not one of the physical interpretations of quantum mechanics can function. Starting from the atom, you've got the atom and you've got the electron going around it. Well, why doesn't the electron fly away to begin with, spontaneously? And it doesn't fly away. Why? Because of what? What keeps it tied to the proton? And until you can answer that question, you don't have a theory. Okay? And that's the issue. Anyways, returning here to good old Ayn says, man needs a method of cognition. Oh, he does? So we need to be cognizant. See, again, this notion that philosophy is the mother of all disciplines, because first you need to detect, you need to observe, you need to, perceive, okay? Before you can do any thinking, any analysis, before you can move into physics or chemistry or whatever, you need to perceive. That's the notion people have, okay? Needs a method of cognition, which he himself has to discover. He must discover how to use his rational faculty, how to validate his conclusions, how to distinguish truth from falsehood. Truth from falsehood? I thought those were opinions. How to set up criteria of what he may accept as knowledge. Criteria for knowledge? I don't know. You tell me. What do you mean by knowledge? What is it? Plato says belief. So we need a criteria for belief. This is what you got to think of. Unless you can define the word knowledge precisely, unambiguously, rigorously, crisply, you can't use the word knowledge because we don't know what you're talking about. And that's the issue here. He has to bring all things into the realm of the humanly knowable. Knowable? What do you mean knowable? Again, without a definition, we don't know. But far from leading to subjectivism, the methods which he has to employ require the most rigorous mathematical precision. So she's going to use mathematics as her method. And that's a description that doesn't explain anything, because math can only describe. It has no power to explain. I dealt with that last time. Okay. Anyways, the most rigorous compliance with objective rules and facts. Again, objective facts. What is that? Facts are the facts, man. Just the facts. The policeman asks, and everybody has their own facts. Okay. If the end product is to be knowledge. Again, we haven't learned anything from her version of knowledge. Let's see Bill's version of knowledge in comparison so that we can have a contrast. Knowledge, to predict the result of an experiment without error. Now we know what knowledge is. And you say, what do you mean, predict the result of an experiment without error? And yeah, the issue with knowledge is that how do you show knowledge? How do you prove to the tribunal, to the jury, to the judge, to whoever, to the prosecutor, to the defense attorney? How do you prove knowledge? How do you prove it to the professors at the university? Do you just regurgitate and say, well, Napoleon went to Waterloo in 1815? I know for a fact. Oh, how do you know for a fact? Were you there? Did you see Napoleon? Did you shake his hand? Did you have intimate knowledge of this? I mean, were you at the battle? Right? And even if you went to the battle and with your camera and filmed it, brought it back, Einstein-like, time travel, and you showed the professor and say, look, I filmed the battle. That's Napoleon there. I interviewed him. You did that in Hollywood. I mean, you can't prove now. All you have is belief. Yeah, okay, I believe you. You sound honest. Looks like everybody who wrote history was onto something. They all said that there was a guy named Napoleon. Can we talk about that as knowledge? Is that knowledge? Just regurgitating what you read in a book and say, yeah, Napoleon was at Waterloo and he fought a battle and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, did he stick his hand also inside his chest there? All those are beliefs. We can only believe the past of what someone tells you. And we can discuss that all day long. In the end, you're going to agree that it's just a belief. We believe that Napoleon went to Waterloo and that he fought a battle because that's what they've been telling us, for the last 200 years. No one's been there to verify it, to film the scene or whatever. We can't even tell you that what happened in the 60s, even though we had cameras, because again, someone's going to say, well, that was done in Hollywood, whatever you're showing. I mean, I can show you Superman flying in the 60s. I saw him. I know for a fact that Superman flies. Does that mean he flies? Are you going to believe that? Or was I there filming Superman, or was that done in Hollywood? I mean, so we got a lot of that issue. You can't use reading a book as knowledge. On the other hand, how do you show that you do know something? Well, you predict. You make a prediction, say, I can predict it without error. It's going to happen. Okay? Whatever it is. And then it happens, whatever, you run an experiment or you have an observation of some natural phenomenon. You say, this is what's going to happen for sure, 100% sure. And then you show your knowledge. But like I said to JF on Sunday, you let go of the pen 100 times so you know for sure gravity pulls it to the center of the earth. And then you bet him $1 million. When you let go of the pen, it stays in the air. And you say, how did that happen? And it turns out that someone turned the blower from below, kept it up in the air, or they had a couple magnets holding it in the air. So you did not know that the pen was going to fall to the floor. You had an intelligent guess based on your experience. But to say that you know for a fact that it's going to fall to the floor, you don't know in advance. You can't predict the future perfectly exactly because, among other things, you don't know if an asteroid hits the Earth before the pen falls to the floor and destroys all of us. And no one collects on the bet because the pen never made it to the floor. Okay, so no, knowledge, we don't have knowledge. There's no such thing, not even God has knowledge. Okay, so let's move on. Here we have another issue that Ayn Rand raises, and that's truth and fact. She says truth is the product of the recognition, identification of the facts of reality. Facts of reality. I thought reality was objective. Facts means that she's already shoving her religion down my throat. She's saying, oh, it's a fact of reality. Whatever I say is a fact. Maybe she's talking about her God. I don't know. What is a fact of reality? Is God a fact of reality? Is an angel, a spirit, a fact of reality? Is that what she was referring to? Man identifies and integrates the facts of reality by means of concepts. Okay, the truth or falsehood, again, opinion of his proposition rests not only on their relation to the facts. She talks about falsehood, truth, facts. All that's opinion. He asserts, but also on the truth or falsehood of the definitions of the concept he uses to assert them, which rests on the truth or falsehood of his designation of essential characteristics. And then in another statement, she talks about right and wrong, ethics. Again, all that is religion. All that is opinion, belief. Okay, it's biases, prejudices. What is my notion of truth and fact to contrast? Again, you don't have to accept my version. All I can do is to contrast against what Ayn Rand said. And here you have it, okay? Truth and fact are subjective opinions. What is true to you is a lie to your neighbor, period. Truth is what Mother Nature knows for sure exists or happened, okay? Especially concerned the secret agent she uses to do her invisible daily chores. I mean, she knows how she runs gravity. She knows how she runs light. She knows how she runs magnetism, okay? So she knows all this stuff for sure, but unfortunately she doesn't share her knowledge with us. We can only guess and theorize, and one guy has one version, another other person has another version. Truth is what Father Universe knows for sure happened. Humans can only guess or can at best guess and speculate and believe, okay? So there's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as knowledge. There's no such thing as fact. We can't use those words in a consistent manner. if we are going to have a rational debate, if you're giving a dissertation. Otherwise, you're just giving your opinion. You say, oh, this is the truth. God is the truth. God is a fact. Particles are a fact. The quantum atom, the planetary atom is a fact. It's truth. We proved it. So this is the issue. And that's the danger also, that people are shoving their religion down your throat by calling it fact, truth, proof. That's where the problem is. Okay, that's why we can't use these words in science. Okay, and here's another one from good old Ayn, and she says, regarding evidence, again, because if you're going to prove something, you're going to have to introduce evidence. What is evidence? Evidence is what you use to persuade the jury. You're asking them to believe like you believe. That's what evidence is all about. What does a prosecutor do when he presents evidence, or the defense attorney for that matter? They present evidence. What's the purpose of evidence? To persuade the jury, to sway the jury to your side of the case. That's what evidence is all about, 150% of it. So every time someone introduces evidence, he's doing religion. Evidence is not science. Evidence is religion, opinion, okay? Because what is evidence of God to you is evidence of non-existence of God to someone else, okay? Okay, the task of man's, right, senses, is to give him evidence of existence. And here you can see she's going to judge existence on the basis of evidence. What? Senses, touching, seeing. So she's going to use her 5 senses, primarily those two, see and touch, to detect or to determine, to evaluate, to establish existence, evidence of existence. Okay, we don't do that in science. Science, we define existence objectively, and then if the entity in question meets the criterion of the definition, if it meets spec, right, then it exists by definition, not because I sense it or believe in it or whatever. Okay? Man's senses are his only direct cognitive contact with reality, and therefore his only source of information. Okay? Without sensory evidence, there can be no concept. You can see she's constantly introducing senses, evidence, truth, fact. Take note of all these, okay? It's all subjective, nothing objective about Ayn Rand whatsoever. Arbitrary means a claim put forth in the absence of evidence, again, and of any sort. Perceptual or conceptual? Perceptual. Okay, she's in perceptual at all points. Cognizance, consciousness, perception, see, touch. It's all what you perceive, what you think when you were drugged, when you had so much cocaine in your body, what you sense. That's what's reality, right? According to Ayn Rand. Its basis is neither direct observation nor any kind of theoretical argument. So she harps on direct observation, even though she mentions in passing theoretical argument, whatever that means to her, right? Man perceives a blob of color by integrating the evidence of his sight and his touch. So again, you can see that she's going to work her way to the word entity, and she's going to be introducing her senses, what you perceive, what you can touch, what you can see, okay? What does Bill think about evidence? Well, there are no observers in science, so we kill all the senses. That's our starting point. Science operates like the mafia. We kill the witness. In science, we make no predictions, run no experiments. That's why there is no such thing as knowledge, because we define knowledge in terms of predicting the results of an experiment. Use no math and verify absolutely nothing. Verification is religion. Math is description, and therefore outside the bounds of physics, and therefore outside the bounds of science. An equation is only a description. So I'm not saying math is religion. No, math is a language. Math, just a language that's used to describe something quantitatively. That's all that math is. That's why it's not a part of science. In science, we don't describe. In science, we explain. Okay? We have to explain a mechanism in physics and explain a behavior in philosophy. We have no use for math in either direction. So in this sense, again, you wonder what Ayn was thinking when she was saying that, she's going to be using math as a method. Previous slide, right? The purpose of physics is to explain a mechanism objectively and rationally by making a movie of it so that we can understand by merely watching the film. You watch a movie of a mechanism, how the window broke, very simple. And you say, okay, this guy says it was a brick that went through the window. And now you know how the window broke. You have an explanation of how the window broke. Very straightforward. And I can make a movie of it, and you can watch the movie and understand the mechanism. And I'm certainly not going to convince you if I say, well, there was this energy and this mass, and it went through with so much force. No, that's not the way you explain a broken window. Again, that's a description, a quantitative description. It doesn't tell you how the window broke, what the theory, what the mechanism is. You can't say force broke the window, not in physics. You got to show me the physical object that went through the window. And that's what many people don't understand, especially all the mathematicians, okay? So we arrive at the key word in Ayn Rand's lexicon, okay? And that's the word entity. And this just leads us into this introduction to what an object is, okay? And again, she shouldn't have been involved with that because entity, what an object is, what a thing is, has nothing to do with philosophy. What a thing is has to do strictly with physics. Physics is responsible for defining what an entity, what a thing is, okay? But Ayn Rand gave it a shot, just like Aristotle and all the others in between, okay? Cognition starts with the ability to perceive things. Oh, she's that perception thing, Entities. Okay, she says things are entities. Okay, but she introduces that word perceive, perception, cognizant, see, touch, knowledge, I guess, included in there. The fact that you're aware of something. So she's going to introduce an observer in this notion of entity that she has. And you'll see that slowly as you see the next few slides here. Of man's 5 cognitive senses, again, she's talking about senses, right? Only 2 provide him with direct awareness of entities, sight and touch. So she's going to introduce sight and touch in her notion of entity, of thing, okay? In order to perceive this something, he needs sight and touch. It is by perceiving entities that man perceives the universe. Okay, so she's going to introduce see and touch, no doubt about it. See, touch, that's subjective because the moon is not an object, an entity, a thing for the blind man because he can't see it. And I don't think he can touch it. I mean, not from here at least, unless he's an astronaut or something. And so the moon doesn't exist, or better, even before that, it's not even an object, according to the blind man. You're just trying to fool him that there's this satellite out there, Neither is the sun, by the way. He can feel the sun. Maybe that one he can say, well, I can touch the sun's rays, so I'll concede that there's a sun, but I'm not going to concede the moon because I can't really perceive it in any way. He can't touch it, he can't smell it, he can't taste it, he can't hear it. The moon doesn't exist. It's not even an object as far as the blind man is concerned. So she's very limited in her notion of what thing is because she's circumscribing it to people who have no disabilities. Okay, is a pen an object to the blind quadriplegic who can't even touch it or doesn't sense it? So the pen's not an object because he can't sense it or see it because he's blind and quadriplegic. So again, putting all that into senses, in terms of senses, is where the error is, where the fault is in Ayn Rand's definition. The concept entity is implicitly the start of man's conceptual development and the building block of his entire conceptual structure. It is by perceiving entities that man perceives the universe. Is it? I don't know. Let me show you why that's wrong, or why that's, she's off her rocker there. Well, I can put this first here, but let's go with the example. Okay, here we have it. Okay, here you have 2 magnets. Okay, and they attract and they repel. Okay, Now, do you see a magnetic field there doing the job between them? Okay. Now, of course, we can sprinkle iron filings over that, and we can pattern, or the iron filings will cover the magnet in a given pattern, and it'll do it consistently. And you can say, well, I can't see the magnetic field, and I can't see the what it does, other than attracting magnets and iron filings. So you would say that, yeah, there is a magnetic field. There is something there. Whatever it is, I can't see it, but I can't touch it. So we can't do it with see and touch. But it turns out that what if we go in there and just have one magnet? Now what happens? And you don't have a way of testing whether it has a magnetic field around it. So now, is that a magnet or just a chunk of iron? See, this is the issue with depending on senses. If you just see that and you have no way of testing, it's just lying on the ground, for example, a piece of lodestone, right, that has magnetic properties, you would not know. You would say, well, that's just a stone. And you would not perceive its magnetic properties. Why? Because you don't see them and you can't touch them. And so if we're going to rely on our senses, we're going to have problems with magnetism, and among others, we're going to have problems also with gravity. I mean, here's gravity, okay? And you go to the lab and you see this, okay? You see two objects being dropped, a feather and a stone there. Well, it's a metal piece of metal. And you can see on the left-hand side, you see it without air, and on the right-hand side, you see it with air. And the air causes resistance, so the feather takes longer to reach the ground. And now here's the actual speed. Okay, quite fast. So did you see the gravitational field? Did you see what caused the feather and the stone, the metal block there? Did you see what brought them down? Did you see the particles pushing on it? Did you see the ropes, in my case, pulling on it? Did you see anything there? So are we going to rely on our senses to determine what gravity is, what magnetism is? This is the issue. The issue is that Ayn Rand limited her notion of entity to that which we can perceive, touch and see. And the question is something there? Is whatever mediates gravity, whatever mediates magnetism, is that a something? Is that so-called magnetic field, is that a something? Well, what is it? I mean, if we can't see it and we can't touch it, how are we going to say that it's even an object? And if you don't put an object in there to produce that effect, those effects, right? You're doing physics with angels. You're doing it with spirits. You're using black magic. That's the issue. You better put an object in there, and that object had better not be tangible or seeable. It has to be an intangible, invisible object. Mother Nature works with invisible agents. Okay. Anyways, well, I'm kind of like over the line now, over my time. I don't know if I can have some questions. Let's see if there were any. Otherwise, I'll see you, what is it, on Sunday? Let's see here. Have you done any video on magnetism? Yeah, I've got several videos on magnetism. Yeah, the theory, the mechanism is there. You just have to look through the video list. There's several videos dealing with that. In fact, I talked about that in what was it, in not in Aberdeen, in Scotland. I can't remember the town now. We had the fourth or fifth conference, Rational Physics Conference, and I dealt with that at large, so you can see in very fine detail how a magnet physically attracts another magnet. Okay, so I have gone in quite a bit of detail on that. Does your confidence in your statement that atoms have shapes stem from tunneling electron? No, tunneling electron microscope data. I never. By the way, I never used a tunneling microscope because that came after my time. As far as I know, I think it was invented after I ceased to work in the semiconductor industry. But I dealt with SEMs. I ran the SEM itself, the scanning electron microscope, and in general terms, it's the same notion. Okay, but anyways, the I work with a scanning electron microscope, and no, it's got nothing to do with the notion. Not a question of confidence. It's a question of definitions. We define what an object is, and we say, look, what is an atom? Is it an object or is it a concept? And I put it under object. I'm saying an atom is an object. Why? Because it has shape. And that's going to be my assumption. It's going to be my assumption before I tell my theory. If I want you to follow my theory, understand the mechanism that I'm going to propose, I have to start with an assumption. What objects am I going to use? What objects am I going to put on the screen so that you can watch the mechanism? Well, I start by saying, let us assume that there's something called an atom. It's a physical object. It looks like this, and I show you the atom. And then now I can say, okay, now let me explain my theory of how Mother Nature does gravity, how Mother Nature does magnetism, electricity, how she does quantum jump, etc. First, I show you the object. Now, does that mean I've seen an atom with my own personal eyes? That I've got special eyeballs that you don't have? No, it's just an assumption. We have to start with an assumption. We have to put an object, something with shape, so that we can explain the mechanism based on that proposal, on that assumption, on that supposition. Okay? That's the logic, the rationale behind it. Okay, anyways, folks, I'll see you on, on Sunday. And we're going to continue with some of the definitions that Ayn Rand had. And I'm going to show that they were all subjective, all of them. Okay? One right after another, it's all going to be subjective. And why? Because Ayn Rand wasn't really, first of all, into physics. And I'm saying she wasn't into philosophy because she had an irrational, an inconsistent, I don't like to use the word wrong or right because it's not wrong or right. Wrong or right is my opinion. It's an irrational one because by objective standards of what rationality is, what irrational means, and I've gone over that. I've got a Quora article on that, a couple of them, in fact. I also have a couple videos on that. I've written extensively on what rationality is. We have objective criteria for that. And Ayn Rand's notions of are irrational because she has a irrational definition of philosophy to begin with. And obviously all her definitions become subjective because she introduces the observer every two sentences. She introduces perception, what you can see and touch. She uses the word cognizant, consciousness, and the end result of all that is knowledge, which is just another opinion. What you know is not what I know, and so on. So it's all subjective. Her philosophy, if we can call it that, cannot be called objectivism. It should be called subjectivism. We'll see you on Wednesday. On Sunday. Bye-bye.